Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to The Robby Rowe Show, episode 89 with Matt Lisle. Let's hear a little soundbite from Matt from today's episode.
Let's train our kids to have as much fun as possible, be as free as possible. And, part of that comes into the way kids play. You and I and all my friends growing up, we played wiffle ball every day. We went to the park and played baseball. So we had the freedom to explore. We pretended to be Ken Griffey Jr. Then we pretended to be this guy. And then we tried to be Mark McGuire.
May I have your attention, please?
Give me my heater.
Now listening to Clear the Mechanism. The Robby Rowe Show. The Robby Rowe Show.
What up? It's your boy Robby rolling, The Robby Rowe Show. You guys are listening to episode 89. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If this is your first ever episode that you're listening to, welcome. If this is your millionth episode you're listening to, welcome. My name is Robby Rowland. I'm the host of The Robby Rowe Show. You can find me on Instagram, RobbyRowe12. I highly encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button on this podcast to not miss out on any future content that I will be producing, guys. I'm trying to have at least one guest on per week with one episode of a Pitching Talks segment per week. For those of you guys who follow me fairly closely, I'm coming back from a lat surgery and I had just started my throwing progression. So the online content might take just a little bit of a backseat as I really embark full-fledged comeback now that I'm starting to throw and obviously, get into that daily pattern of strengthening my arm and in hopes to get ready for a potential winter ball experience. But enough about me. Today's guest, Matt Lisle. We have a fantastic episode for you guys today. If you do not know Matt, this guy is amazing. So, fun fact, I think we talk about it a little bit in the show, is like he coached against me in high school. And if you guys don't know, I went to high school at a super small town. So the fact that the baseball world is as small as it is just absolutely baffles me each and every day. But Matt currently works with a numerous amount of MLB professional and college players. He's been a head coach. He's been a hitting coach. He's worked in baseball, softball, and deals with kids. Like I said, MLB guys. He is literally the internet's most followed hitting coach. I'm not kidding. So if you guys want to dive into more of what Matt Lisle brings to the table, he's got a ton of outlets in which you can follow him and even sign up. He's got a hitting vault for those of you guys who are looking at more hitting content. You guys can head over to the show notes of this episode, therobbyroeshow.com/089. So therobbyroeshow.com/089. That will include all of his links. Literally, I'll put all of his links from his Instagram, Twitter, to his website, to the Hitting Vault website, to his YouTube. He's got a ton of great content, and you'll see it firsthand, or I guess hear it firsthand in this episode, that he brings so much value to the table in his understanding of the simplicity of hitting, but also like we dive into the data analytics of hitting and how he can take all of the over complexities of data analytics and simplify them to just completely make sense. And his big MO is, as a hitting guy in today's game, is just being a translator for the athlete. And that's literally what it is. I think separates the best instructors, not just in baseball, but in overall life, is the ability to understand the athlete and create a relationship to therefore best equip the athlete to understand each and every component to what we're trying to teach. And Matt and I go back and forth. It's great talking to a fellow nerd that's in the game of baseball. So it's a fantastic episode for you guys today. I'm excited to bring it to you guys. Like I said, if you have yet to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button to not miss out on any future episodes. When you do head over to the show notes, like I said, therobbyroeshow.com/089, you'll find all of the services that I also have to offer, from monthly remote coaching to one-time mechanical video analysis, and also all three of my ebook options, which include a mobility routine ebook, a pitcher's warm-up routine ebook, and a pitch grip analysis ebook. So if you are listening to this episode for the first time and don't know any of the services that I have to offer, head over to the show notes, and that whole entire page will not only have Coach Matt's links and everything that he offers, but also you can find all of my services as well. Cool. Like I said, thank you guys for tuning in today's episode, and I hope you guys enjoy. And if you do, let me know in a written review, if that's not asking too much. All right, so let's get to the episode. Enjoy, guys. Much love. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Robby Rowe Show, episode 89. Matt Lisle on the show today. Matt, how you doing, man? How's your day going?
Doing great, Robby. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that we had about 5 minutes to touch up before the show started, so I didn't butcher your last name there on the air. That would have been embarrassing. So where specifically are you coming from? I know you're a Bay Area guy, but what part?
I grew up in the East Bay, kind of about 30 miles east of San Francisco, in the Martinez, Concord area.
All right. So I'm super curious, and I know that this is a very broad question to start the show off, but like, can you take us into your background as a player, like coming up through the ranks?
Yeah. So I grew up here, played Little League, and then I went to Berean Christian High School in Walnut Creek. And I actually committed to go play football at Fresno State at my senior year, and some just life stuff happened, and I didn't end up going there. And I played college summer ball in the college summer league, which not even sure if it exists anymore around here, with teams from Humboldt and San Luis Obispo.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I played summer ball that year, and Cal State Hayward, which is now called Cal State East Bay, the head coach there said, "Hey man, come pitch for us, come play for us." And I went there, and I tore my rotator cuff in the fall, and the next year I tried to make a comeback and just was never back to 100%. At the same time, I had a very young child that I had when I was 19 years old, and so it was kind of like, man, what am I doing here? I love baseball. I'd like to make this work, but I'm just not. I just can't really make it happen, or it doesn't make sense to continue to pursue it. And my old high school baseball coach asked me to come be his assistant coach, and he had been there for like 35 years. And I said, okay, cool, come help you out. And halfway into the season, he got fired. And next thing you know, I'm like 22 years old. I'm a head varsity baseball coach, and 20 years later, I'm still doing it.
Is that at Berean?
Yeah, I was at Berean. Yes.
Oh man. So for my listeners, we just talked a little bit before the show started. So I totally, now I can't forget. But it was your brother that would have played against me. Your dad coached against me. Did you coach against me as well?
Yeah, so I was the head coach there for a little while. I'm the oldest of 7, so I had one brother who is 32 years old that I coached at Berean, and then after I left Berean and started coaching in college and beyond, my dad took over the head job at that high school and coached my youngest brother, who is 24, 25. I probably should know that, but
we'll edit that part out.
Yeah, my youngest brother, played at Berean for my dad, and I think he might have been a year younger than you, and so I know that they had, definitely played some games against you guys a few times in your career as well. So just kind of a funny small world that baseball is.
It's funny too, because when people think of California baseball, they think of Southern California. Like, and not to say Southern California baseball isn't good, but Northern California baseball, man, especially like when I was around in, like, I would say like 07 to 2010, 2011 especially, there's some good freaking talent, man, in that NorCal area. But so this will be a good little segue topic, but you said you're one of 7 brothers or siblings?
I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I've got 2 sisters and 4 brothers.
Oh, so you're the oldest? Okay.
Yes.
All right, because I was talking to someone the other day, talking about, like, characteristic traits between athletes and why certain athletes, when they face life experience, circumstances in their career, that they respond differently than another person. We were kind of diving into the whole, like, younger sibling and the older sibling rivalry. Can you relate to that at all? Like, what kind of characteristic traits you got molded through just by being like the oldest sibling?
Well, it was interesting. My brother below me. He's 3 years younger. He pitched in college as well, and had a much better arm than I did. And so he was. I mean, 3 years is a pretty big difference when you're growing up in the sense of rivalry. But as brothers go, I mean, it's still super competitive in everything that you do, and from wiffle ball in the backyard to video games to everything else. And so, I wouldn't say that I had the huge rivalry. Now, I would say now as adults, as everyone is adults now, when it comes to things like ping pong and stuff like that, I feel like the family rivalry and brothers is higher than anything. We still have wiffle ball tournaments at the beach in Lake Tahoe, and still have these competitive things going. So for me as the oldest, with much younger siblings, it wasn't as much, but now as adults, it seems to be even more. Yeah,
because my brother and I were 3 years, so I was the freshman when he was the senior in high school, and
me too. I was a senior when my younger brother was a freshman.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a huge age gap, but it's like the perfect one because it gave me something to like always strive for, right? Because I was never going to win, no matter what sport it was. So speaking of sports, you said you were a football player. So does that mean you're a huge advocate of multi-sport athletes? Because I know that's a really mainstream topic nowadays, especially within the youth development process. Is like, should kids play year-round baseball? Should they play multiple sports? It seems like there's a couple different people that believe in multiple different facets there. What is your take on that?
I think it just depends on the kid. For me, I lettered in 4 sports in high school. I played football in the fall, and then then it rolled into basketball season. I played basketball, and then in the spring I played baseball, and we worked out a deal that I ran track as well. I actually never went to any track practices, but I went to the meets and I ran track. So for me, like growing up, and it's just different. In our neighborhood, we played roller hockey for a season. Then we played two-hand touch football in the streets. And then we did this, and then we did that. And it was just constant different sports going on. And so baseball season, we played baseball. And basketball season, we played basketball. And so, that's how I was wired. I loved playing every sport that I could. And I think there's a lot of kids nowadays that do that. And I'm all for kids to do that. But there are kids who just love baseball, or they love just playing basketball, and they're not really that interested in other sports. Mm-hmm. To me, I think kind of depends on a case by case basis. I've got 5 kids. I've got a son who's going to be 8 years old soon, and if he said, I hate playing basketball and I don't want to play it, I'm not going to force him to do that. But if he really likes playing soccer, I'm all for that too. So I just think it depends on the kid. And for me, my goal as a parent is just to find the things that they're passionate about, and just encourage and push them in those things. So I think that multiple sports is better, but I do think there's some cases that kids are just wired to love one sport and they want to go all in on that, and I'm okay with that too. I just think has to be some boundaries around rest and time on that.
Yeah, well, let's dive into that, man. Speaking of rest and stuff, is I know there's everyone's different, right? Every individual is going to respond differently to different types of load. But what is your ideal scenario as far as if a kid just loves baseball, just wants to play baseball? Say he's a pitcher, shortstop, outfielder, does it all, hits, whatever. As far as throwing, because I know there's a huge UCL epidemic now. Kids are getting it like Tommy John at 14, 15 years old, where when you and I were growing up, man, that was never even heard of. So where do you stand with how much kids throw year round? Should they take X amount of months off? Should they just keep throwing and just kind of tone down the volume, or where do you kind of stand on that?
Again, I think it's really dependent on the kid. I would say, as kids are starting to get into high school ball, when I was coaching high school for a long time, the way that I always wanted to model it was that when school started, that first month of school was a rest period. It was just, getting acclimated back into school. They're doing hopefully maybe doing another sport, and then using kind of that December, January time as more of a spring training, in the sense of just starting to get our bodies going and low load in a sense. And then, as in high school around here, February 1st is kind of when things get started. And so February, you got the high school season. I think it's great to go hard in the summer and then you have this nice rest period in kind of the early fall. Maybe you're starting to get your body going a little bit in better shape, but rest is really relative to the coach and the kid too. I mean, I'm all for playing a bunch of games and working on development in the summer, but again, if you're a kid who throws 20 innings a week, it's crazy. It's a much different workload than someone who pitches 7 innings a week, so I think it's just a matter of management in that, and there's definitely times that things need to be shut down and rehealed. I try to look at it as from a professional athlete standpoint. These guys are professional athletes, major league players. They have this rest period. They have this downtime, and to think that kids should be working their bodies and muscles more than professional athletes, that just does that. Right.
Hey guys, Robby Rowland here. Sorry to interrupt the show, but I want to inform each and every one of you who are listening that if you are interested in purchasing some of the most mainstream baseball products on the market right now, from Jaeger bands, the Velo Pro harness, I got tap weighted balls, I got all of these amazing products from companies that I've partnered with. And I want to provide you guys with a discount if you're interested in purchasing any of these products. So head over to the show notes, therobbyrowshow.com/089. And on that page, if you scroll down, you'll see a little segment in which I talk about all of the companies that I've partnered with to bring you guys discounts. Like I said, from J-Bands, Pocket Radars, Velo Pros, tap weighted balls, Indian clubs, med balls, all of those things. All of those amazing products that I myself use on a day-to-day basis to improve my baseball development, you guys can have at a discounted price. So be sure to go head on over to that page and click that option if you're interested in purchasing. Cool. Thanks. Let's get back to the show. No, I hear you, man. I want to segue because I didn't even realize this until 10 minutes before we hopped on, but when I was doing my research to try to figure out how to pronounce your last name, I stumbled upon, I didn't know you wrote a book. I stumbled upon Dear Coach, Real Emails from Parents Behaving Badly on the Field, at Home, and Behind Their Computer Screens. So I want to know, what prompted this? If someone listening that's interested in taking a look at it, what's included within that?
So for probably the last 10 years or so, my dad, who coached, high school, little league, travel ball for over 30 years, we used to always have these conversations about just the crazy emails we get from parents, and I can remember coaching at Berean one time. I got an email from a senior parent whose kid wasn't starting, and it was a 4-page email on why he should be the starting third baseman and why I'm not doing a good job of evaluating it. And just, there's so many stories out there of crazy parent emails and coach emails. And so I kept saying, hey, my dad and I kept saying, let's put together a book. Let's do this book. And so finally, at the beginning of this year, I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I had the idea of hiring an illustrator to illustrate these emails as well. So the way the book is formatted is that on the left side of the page you have this email, and I changed most of the identities and names just because. But on the other side of the page is the drawing of this, and so it just turned out really good. And I'm donating 100% of the proceeds to a charity called The Base, which works with inner city kids in Chicago and New York and Boston, working on kind of an inner city baseball academy. And I just thought that would be kind of a cool project and cool idea. And the book's done really well. It's been really fun just to see. But, I mean, it's been – the emails that are in there are just astounding, the things that happen. And I'll just give you one example.
Yes.
A coach gave me a story of a parent, 14U soccer, and he takes the kid out of the game. And within 2 minutes later, in the middle of the game, the kid hands him his cell phone and says, "My mom wants to talk to you." Grabs the phone, and the coach can hear the mom screaming across the sidelines, not through the phone. He can actually hear her on the other side of the sidelines yelling that he took her son out of the game. I mean, and like I said, I mean, and there's so many stories like that. Just parents just behaving badly, and the things that in the emails that they send as well. And I said every one of the stories is like that. I mean, it's just like you can't believe that story, but at the same time, like it's actually true, and all the stories in there are actually true. And that's just one example of it. So it was a fun project. It was inspired by my dad and the conversations him and I have had over the years on like, oh man, that would be a really good book, and just finally decided to do it.
So you said you're coaching your 8-year-old, right? That's what you said earlier.
No, I'm not. I just don't have the time. Being on the road with the White Sox, that's just it's difficult to be able to do that. But when I can, I have coached him.
Right.
I think 2 years ago, I coached his little league team, and that was really fun. But I try as much as I can to do that. And then that's kind of the struggle as a college or professional coach. It's really difficult to step into coaching your kids, and it's just kind of one of the struggles of it.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say because like I have a lot of dads that tune into this show, and like bless their heart, man. Like they're always looking for ways to get the most out of their kid, and you know how dads can be, man. Like my dad was the same way. He coached my brother and I growing up. And what's like the biggest piece of advice that you would have for a baseball dad?
I would say the biggest piece of advice that I would give is just giving them permission to fail. I think that from the outside view, most parents think that their coach dad gives their kid preferential treatment. They call it daddy ball and things like that. In my experience, at least as me as a kid, as my dad coaching me, he was harder on me than anybody else. Yeah. And most baseball players that I know, they would say the same thing. And so I would just say, permission to fail to me means that when your kid goes 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, when you get into the car, you're not ripping them about it. And then when they hit a home run, the whole ride home is that you're the greatest. And so I think that kids nowadays, they need to be able to fail. They need to be able to go 0 for 4 and be able to deal with it without dad chewing them out. And I think that a lot of kids, at least in my experience, they associate their parents' love with how their performance is on the field, and to me that gets really dicey for kids and their development, because not every kid's going to make it to the major leagues. Not every kid is going to get drafted, and as soon as you start, your behavior towards your kids based on how they perform, it gets pretty hard for that kid to develop into a good person and to a good athlete and the things that you've wanted them to do in the first place.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was the same story here, man. My freaking pops was a big leaguer, and it was like my brother and I knew from an early age, like there was a little expectation there, and there was already that like internal pressure that really wasn't existent, but we kind of made it into existence, I guess. And I just think like my pops just did such a good job of like, I guess like not really looking for those expectations, but doing everything in his ability. And like the biggest thing that I took away from that was just being there, as a pop, like just being able to be there when the kid wants to take BP or when he wants to go throw. And I think that kind of promotes more loving from the kid's side, right? Because like you want to as a pop, like you want your kid to love the game. I mean, it's such a beautiful game too. And
for me, I would just say that the biggest advice to that is creating the environment for them to want to do those things. I mean, it's a huge difference to be like, hey, you need to go to the backyard and you need to hit 100 balls off the tee. But if you can create that environment where you're going out there and you're having fun and you're doing those things, it's just entirely different. The kids usually will gravitate towards, hey, I want to hang with dad and have fun. But if you make it about the work, as a kid, that's not very enticing. So creating that atmosphere and that environment that they want to have fun and succeed in, it's entirely different than pushing them to do it.
Yeah, it's like that the have to versus the get to mentality, right? Like you don't have to go out and freaking take 5,000 swings. Like you get to go out and do that with your dad. Like that's it's just about creating that, like you said. No, that's huge. So I want to kind of segue into I know we touched on a lot of youth stuff, and maybe we'll find correlations along the way, but I want to dive into now, as you see the data analytics of the game of baseball today. I hate to say it, the game's changing a little bit. Would you agree with that statement as far as the game changing from a technology analytical side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the game, I think we're finding ways to measure and develop better using technology and data. So yeah, it definitely has changed in just the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think a big topic on my show too is how we can utilize the technology, utilize the data, like you said, for the betterment of someone's development, but it also can be a little bit harmful. I want to kind of dive into the harm of it first, because I think that's a big priority for me to get the information out there, is because I've been a guy throughout the course of my career where it's paralysis by analysis, information overload. I'm getting so much information at once, and then I'm trying to do and control so many different things, and I see that with data too. I see that with kids, from the pitching side, going on a Rapsodo throw and seeing a bunch of different metrics and going, okay, well, this and that is this way, and I got to do this, and I blah blah blah. So from the hitting side, first, is that something that you can sense too, and then how do you go about as an instructor, kind of preventing that and making sure that the kid's going about his development in an optimal way using the data?
So for me, the goal of a hitting coach when it comes to data is to convey what you want the hitter to do in as little or as least amount of words as possible. So, I think the hitting coaches need to know data. I think they need to know technology, and I think that there's a ton of conversations that hitting coaches can have to get their hitters better. But when it comes to working with a hitter, and you have to know your hitters. I've got some major leaguers and minor leaguers and college guys that love to talk data. They're really good at it, and it does not affect them. They don't analyze it. And then I have other guys who they want to keep it super simple and don't want to. So you got to know your athletes a little bit as well. But my goal is to, again, say the least amount and convey what I'm trying to say. And so for hitting coaches, nowadays, we're translators. We've got to be able to translate data into simple terms. And, for me, I think the data has really helped to expose hitting coaches, to expose bad theory. And I think that it allows us to start pointing towards, better things.
Yeah, it takes the guessing out of the equation, right?
Totally.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I see, which I love. And I was watching one of your videos that you said the same thing. It was like, how can we as instructors get away from internal rotation of what was the femur or something to pointing the P at the or pointing the pocket at the pitcher. That's huge though, right? I mean, it's about being able to keep it simple, and that's why I kind of thought that there was going to be a little bit of correlation from teaching your kid, because those same methods still apply in the game of baseball, right?
Yeah, it's just finding ways that they learn. On a totally kind of almost side tangent. Yesterday, I watched the Ellen Show with my wife, and she had a guest on there from England who was a teacher. And he teaches by rap, and I mean he did Green Eggs and Ham to the beat of a Dr. Dre song, and which was, one, was incredible, but two, he talks about how in his classroom using rap in all of his lessons, the kids retain the information so much better, and has had a lot of success doing that. And so the reason I tell that story is because kids and adults, you've got to find the ways that they can learn their thing, and for everybody it's different. And I think that sometimes we say things like rip the handle apart, or I tell you, seesaw the elbows, or and so there are different terms that that clicks, I get it, that makes sense to me. Show your pocket to the pitcher, turn your back, whatever the terms are that you're trying to convey, it can click for people with different ways. So it's just a matter of finding the terms and the feels and the drills that work for that player.
It's so funny you mentioned that thing about the rap song, because I talk about this all the time, but like, how am I so good at retaining music lyrics and I can't remember anything else? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm the same way. I'm totally the same way.
I got to start rapping now for like pitching mechanics teaching.
There you go.
We'll have to figure a way out for that. No, I love it. So I'm curious as far as your route into understanding data analytics. Where did that start for you, and how'd you go about, best really getting an idea for the presentation of it?
Well, the funny thing about my journey in coaching is that I am a huge nerd. I am a huge nerd. I was really good at math growing up. Back in the early 90s, when personal computers were first starting out and people really didn't have that many of them, I was building them literally part by part. And I was learning Q basic and programming in junior high. I would say at 13, 14 years old, I could type 75 to 85 words a minute. And back in like 1991 and 1990, nobody could do that. No kids were doing that. I feel like nowadays it's every kid can do that, but
right.
in my circle, nobody was doing those things. So I was really into that stuff. I was really just a huge nerd, and at the same time, like this athlete who loved it. So what I realized is that in my coaching career, coaching at a small high school and then coaching in college, I was getting jobs and having success because the computer and data and technology did not I was not afraid of those things.
Right.
I dove into those things. I used them as tools for, we were measuring bullpen speeds in all of our bullpens in high school, in 2007, 2008, as soon as it was available, and we were tracking it and we were writing it down. So, I was always really into it. And then I would say 2013, 14, when the ZEP bat sensors came on, I really got into that. I got to know them pretty well and using it with our hitters. And then in 2015, 16, I bought my own hit tracks, and I had a ton of pro hitters in the offseason with me. And it just allowed me to really see what they were doing, what they were capable of when we made swing changes, what you saw. And so I kind of just from that point just was all in on data and trying to find ways to use data to help my hitters out. So that's just a piece of it. But for me, like I said, it just came really naturally as a nerd. Like that area. Whereas most of the coaches that I knew growing up in my 20s and early 30s. They were old school guys who hunt and peck on the keyboard and
right.
didn't really weren't really open to learning it. They didn't have the skill set for that. And fast forward 2019, and I watch all these young guys on Twitter and in our organization, other organizations, and man, everybody can do these things. And like I said, 10 years ago, that was not the case, and so
right.
The personnel and their skills when it comes to data and technology is off the charts right now.
And maybe you can answer this question for me, but I know when I was doing my scouting process when I was in high school, it was only about it was just radar guns. Like scouts would bring radar guns, and in the showcases it was about how hard you threw, or maybe even measuring your long toss 60 times. During showcases, are they doing do they have blast sensors on the bat, determining bat speed, and do they have hit tracks available at these showcases now?
Yeah, I would say all the good ones have, and the pitching side too, spin rate, spin efficiency.
Oh yeah,
all of those things. Yeah, I would say that most colleges and most pro scouts or any showcases, they have all of that data and more, and so every bat sensor and everything that they can get, we have been working on getting for sure.
That's crazy, man. So since you said you got to hit tracks, which is a great idea, you train big leaguers, you do all this stuff from the hitting side. I'm curious as to far as what metrics specifically are you looking at? And I hate to ask it, I know it's broad, but what would you say is the most important metrics when developing a really successful hitter?
I would say number one is exit velocity, exit speed. I mean, doing damage is the number one thing. You've got to be able to hit the ball hard. I don't care. And so exit velocity trumps everything, because you hit a 100-mile-an-hour ball on the ground, it has a better chance of being a base hit than you do a 70-mile-an-hour ground ball. So when it comes to other batted ball metrics like launch angle and everything else, there's a lot of importance and value in those, but like doing damage, hitting the ball hard trumps everything in regards to. So I would say that was number one. I think the correlation of exit speed and bat speed, there's bat speed would be up there. I think launch angle. I think launch angle can be really, really useful if done right. I just think it can be used very dangerously as well. But
how do you go about teaching that? I mean, sorry to cut you off there, but
no worries. So when I was the hitting coach at the University of South Carolina for softball, our hitters were so well versed in the hit track and exit velocity and launch angle. They could have given this podcast interview, but they knew that the top of our cage was about 14 degrees launch angle, and for most people, if I asked them, that people who don't like launch angle, I would say, what is your preferred hit? Let's say for the average person, say, I want a line drive over the shortstop's head. Cool. I completely agree with that. And so, but let's put a number on it. Let's say that's 10 to 14 degrees launch angle.
Right.
So we're just using different language, and our kids knew that between 10 to 14 degree launch angle is a nice high line drive over the shortstop in the gap and turns into a double, and that's awesome. I think it's the same thing as saying I want line drives. And so I just think it's a matter of how you use it, and the language of it and how it's interpreted. And so our hitters in South Carolina knew you hit the top of the cage, a nice high line drive, it's about 14 degree launch angle. They knew that, but the launch angle wasn't important to them. Right. But they did know what that was. And so to me, launch angle and training for that is totally secondary to doing damage, having a good bat path, bat speed, and stuff like that. And they go hand in hand, but I would definitely focus on the doing damage part before I would focus on the launch angle part.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because me being a pitcher, the most important thing that I look for when I'm looking at all my data is the opposite, right? Like making sure that the guys at the dish aren't hitting the ball hard. So I think it goes hand in hand for the pitcher side too, because we're looking at exit velocity too, because we know that balls hit harder have more of a chance of being hit for home runs, for runs, right? So that's something it was funny. I was looking at your Instagram page, and it comes down to interpretation. And I saw this post that you made on I forget who the hitter was. It maybe like a Donaldson leg kick guy, and then it was like, what so and so perceives it as, and then the next image was like a little leaguer with this totally absurd leg kick, and it was like what little leaguers perceive that as. So How do you go about that? Like, how do you go about, because I know how kids are, and they see people on TV with these, with these long fly ball home runs and these really high leg kicks, and how do you go about explaining, like this is why so and so does it, but this is what it looks like? And I don't know if that makes sense as a question, but as far as like the interpretation of it,
I get what you're saying. I would say that I want my kid to have as much freedom in the swing as possible. For me, my favorite player growing up was Ricky Henderson, and I had I mimicked his swing until I was in high school. Mm-hmm. So I'm all for mimicking. I think like kids should do that. They pick your favorite player in your swing and try to be just like that as much as you can. And then I think like there has to be some discussions on like, okay, he has a leg kick because he could do these things. He's pretty elite athlete, and so I'm all for kids mimicking their coaches. I want them to have the freedom to do that. I think that in my experience, youth baseball kids are throttled. They're don't strive, don't do this, don't do that. And the goal of youth baseball at many levels that I have seen has been like the goal is to make contact. And so let's make contact. Let's take all the movement out, and let's try to get the bat on the ball. And for some kids, like that is a goal. That like you need to like calm it down to do that. I would say, let's train our kids to have as much fun as possible, be as free as possible. And part of that comes into the way kids play. You and I and all my friends growing up, we played wiffle ball every day. Oh. We went to the park and played baseball. So we had the freedom to explore. We pretended to be Ken Griffey Jr. Then we pretended to be this guy, and then we tried to be Mark McGuire. We tried to be different people. And so nowadays, if kids, say an 8-year-old, for example, they go home and they go to practice, and they only go to practice with a coach, and it's organized, and it's, don't step, don't stride, don't do this, keep your head on the ball. To me, those kids are going to have a really hard time because they just don't have the freedom to explore and stuff like that. So, for me, I'm all for the movement, and I think that a lot, like in the backyard, you get to learn what you can do. You learn, like you said, you talked about your brother. Me playing against my brother wiffle ball in the backyard, I learned what I could do, and I didn't want him to strike me out, so I'm not going to have a crazy swing to that, And so, I think there's a lot to be said about finding ways for your kids to explore how their body works and what they can do.
Yeah, and like it's getting out of that restriction. I think that kind of goes hand in hand too with I think as far as like if I were to teach quote unquote pitching mechanics to like an 8-year-old, I'm teaching him from an early age, like, okay, point A to point B to point C. And I know from experience, man, it was like I was living in restriction because I was thinking so mechanical rather than, like you said, exploring your body, exploring the different type of movement capacity and movement capability and just being an athlete, right? And just like getting out of that restriction. That's huge. No, man. Well, I think that's huge. I think I can't really speak for youth sports right now. I'm not really in the youth sports scene, but just from like a lot of questions and messages that I get, I think there's a very fine line between the instruction and the development side. People wanting to develop their 7 to 9-year-olds, but I think the last question I want to hit with you is, for the dads out there, like when do you see fit? When do you see appropriate to get their kids, get their baseball kids, into start training baseball specific lessons?
I would say, and I feel like it's kind of a weak answer, but it's really individual per kid. I would say, being the oldest of 7, having 5 kids, that me personally, if it was available to me at 6 years old, I would have loved one-on-one hour-long hitting lessons, and I would have loved every minute of it. And I would say that my 7-year-old, he's not ready for that. He loves his Legos, and he loves all the other things, and his iPad and things that are. He's just not that into it yet, and and I'm doing my best to try to kind of foster some excitement and passion into it, but. So, it depends on the kid. I did lessons for a long time. I did it for a living, and I can tell you that there were some 8-year-olds that I did lessons with that they did not want to be there, and it was just miserable for them as it was for me. Right. And I even told the parents, hey, man, I don't mind working with your kid, but you are lighting money on fire, and the kid doesn't want to be here. Right. And I kind of changed my policy after a couple of years to 12 years old and up, and anyone younger had to be, someone who was, gung-ho on wanting lessons from a kid standpoint, not the parent standpoint. So I think it depends on the kid. I think that there are some kids who are 6 years old, they could handle it and they would love it. I think that parents get caught up in comparing their kids to other kids and where level they're at. I think that I have seen 12 and 13-year-olds just starting to play, get drafted and play professional baseball. And I've seen other kids, who played since they were 6 years old and not make their varsity baseball team. So I would just encourage parents to try to, figure out what is best for them. But I would say generally, right between the 10 and 12-year-old range is when you start seeing, a kid really push into it a little bit, and I think that's usually a pretty good age to say, hey, you want to try this? Yeah. We want to try some hitting lessons, and give it a try, and they might really like it, they might really enjoy it, and you build onto that. And so I think it's more of a parent-kid conversation and knowing your kid.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. Well, hey, man, I want to be respectful of your time, but tell my audience where they can find you. I'm sure you're pretty much everywhere on social media or the internet, but go ahead and let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on my handle is Coach Lisle on everything from Facebook to Instagram and Twitter, but you can also find me at thehittingvault.com. Thehittingvault.com is my website with all of my hitting instruction, drills, game plans, everything that you could imagine about hitting, we've put in that place. And so it's generally for, I would say, the 10 to 18-year-old range, but we have a ton of major leaguers and minor leaguers who are members of the Hitting Vault as well. So I would say that's a great place to start. If you're looking for hitting instruction, my website is thehittingvault.com.
Cool. Yeah, I'll link all that in the show notes of this episode too, man. Well, hey, thanks so much, man, for taking the time. It was a pleasure getting to talk to you, and I'll sign you off the air.
Thanks, Robby. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Like I said, if you have yet to subscribe to this podcast, be sure to do so to essentially not miss out, right? Give yourself an advantage. The whole foundation for why I started this podcast was to, inform every single one, or equip every single one of you guys with as much information as I could provide. But like you've noticed here, if there's things that I can't provide, I can bring on guys like Coach Matt Lisle and hopefully better equip you guys. So much love, and head on over to the show notes, therobbyroseshow.com/089 to check out all of Matt's links as well as my services that I could provide you guys. And one last thing, if you're still there and you love me, a written review goes a long way, or even just like a review for my show. So that's not too much to ask. Love you guys. God bless. Enjoy the rest of y'all's day. Until next time, your boy's out. See ya.